All right. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you Veronica Hernandez, who was a practicing therapist in her native country of Peru, and then came here to enter the doctoral program of East West Psychology. So she has her, she's going to tell us about her roots there and how her shamanic practice and her entheogenic involvement informs her overall professional life and her life as a human being. So please welcome Veronica Hernandez.
Good afternoon. One of my favorite topics is ayahuasca, and being in a circle and sharing stories. In my country, we share a lot of stories. There's a lot of the therapeutic or the connection is through sharing our life stories. Medicine is as well something that is part of our culture. So as we're growing, we are embedded more in a connecting to the cosmos, connecting to nature, connecting to one another as a form of healing. So at the core of this presentation is through the connection with ourselves. It's almost like at a cellular level, we need to decondition in order to connect to cosmos, connect to nature, connect to oneself, and connect to others. I'm going to go down the memory lane of my process, which started when I was about 4 or 5 years old. Very aware of my sexuality and spirituality. There has been a split for me in terms of what sexuality and what spirituality meant. I grew up with a mother that was Catholic and a father that was more shamanic in his worldview of the world. I somehow, through my ayahuasca journeys, realized how much the Judeo-Christian containing myth is really embedded in my body. I started being very aware of my sexuality since I was very little, and really tormenting, like that notion of sin and guilt. I don't know how many of you, but I grew up with a very tormenting, it's almost like a dirty thing about sex, and also in spirituality. Through my religion, it was a God outside of myself, a white God, a male God that I had no connection to, that was always like seeing me in my everyday life. And somehow I internalized a judgment that kids cannot have sexuality or an expression of it. I didn't even know what that was, but that feeling of shame and guilt, I really believe we carry on a cellular level. As a part of coming here to CIIS, for me it was finding a place in academia where I can integrate my work as a therapist and shamanism as my spiritual practice. But it was also like, so where do I meet? Like, how do I integrate inside of me these two polarities? One of the things that I've done with a series of ayahuasca sessions was be aware of the origins, or like those memories that we forget, that we're not aware of, that is very hard to tap in, other than when I am drinking ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is this medicine that really, really takes you to look at your soul, to look at your spirit, to look at all the suffering. It's like Each of us has a way of existential angst. Each of us has a way of not being fully sensual and sexual and connected to the body. I don't know how many, and then maybe later we can have an interaction. I would love to hear from you. If you have a religion or a spiritual practice or something that includes the body as informing of God. I did not grow up with that. And through some of my work with entheogens, I could discover that pathway for me. So this is some of the things that I've been talking about. Cellular guilt and shame around sexuality and spirituality, inherited by the Judeo-Christian containing myth. I also grew up in the Andes. My dad is a mining engineer. So, as I said earlier, a lot of my shame and guilt, a lot of my intrusive thoughts since I was a child were dissipated in the Andes, walking in the mountains, being in connection with nature. It was almost like my body would wake up. This is when I was around 5 or 6 years old. Would wake up and just relax and feel connected. So there was a profound connection to nature that I found at that age. And this experience, or this felt sense of interconnection with everything, that is the heart of the shamanic view. When I was reading about sacred sexuality, or people that have tried to bridge or bring together sex and spirit, I ran into, for instance, collection of writings. And one of them was the need that we need to have a body and a sex-positive spiritual practice or trend that can heal that collective image that is ingrained with guilt and shame, and is the one that is informing the sexuality in the Judeo-Christian society and in many other ones where religion is not accepting of the body, is not accepting of sex as a natural way of connecting, of being, of expression. I mean, all of us here are a product of that sexual union. All of us have some form of wanting to connect to everything through the act of sex as well. One of the things that I also discovered is sex and sexual energy are the creative energy, are our life force. And that I discovered through ayahuasca, through the waking up in my body about those energies that inform us if we're going to have sex. A lot of the times, what we spend time on is sexuality in our heads. And we negotiate this and that, but it's almost like, do we really need our bodies? I mean, do we really know our bodies? Do we really know what wakes us up? Like naturally. Are we ever outside in nature? Like stripping all those layers of conditioning. A lot of the times we're not. A lot of the times we get all this information through religion, through our parents, through society, that puts so much conditioning in men and women that I'm really surprised of how much still we can relate and enjoy sexuality between people. So I'm going to talk a little bit of my experiences with ayahuasca, which have helped me heal this split that I had between sexuality and spirituality. A God outside of myself judging my sex life or my expressions of sexuality. So as we all know, shamanism is any practice of healing and divination that involves the purposeful induction of an altered state of consciousness called the shamanic journey. The shaman enters a non-ordinary reality and seeks knowledge and healing from the spirit beings in those worlds. My practice involves being guided with a shaman. A lot of my experience with ayahuasca has been through vegetalismo. I've been on some diets to be able to peel the layers of the mental layers and getting access to the body that can inform me about this split. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experiences. It has been a long journey since my first encounter with ayahuasca. From the very first time, I felt a profound connection to nature, more than the one I had since childhood. When the terror and the anxiety of physical, emotional, and spiritual pain overtook me after drinking the brew, something bigger than myself made me stand up, purge, and walk outside, walking in the jungle. There, nature held me like a mother would hold her vulnerable newborn. I fell on my knees and cried all the tears of this life and more. Why? I screamed to the trees, to the sky, and everything that surrounded me. Why? And I had this feeling in my body. It was like time stopped. And an absolute silence penetrated my soul. And it felt like I was dying, without knowing the meaning of my life. I remember looking at the trees and feeling small, worthless, hopeless. Like life again and again took away loved ones, desires, and the things and experiences I yearned for. It felt almost as if when I wanted something deep in my heart, just by thinking about it or feeling it, it was going to be taken away. I felt like life had no meaning, that I was completely alone in the world, and that no matter what I did, I would never feel whole. I felt I did not have a containing myth that could hold me at this time. I did not have a trusting relationship with any God. That was my first encounter with this visionary plant teacher. It took a few sessions, a series of sessions with ayahuasca, to understand my fragmentation and deep feelings of despair. I also realized that when I'm depressed and grieving, I completely shut down and close myself to connection with others. Ayahuasca has helped me explore this existential fragmentation, examine it with more consciousness, and seek integration in my life. The connection with nature helped me feel that everything is interrelated, and it is. It's almost like being in the jungle, you're part of it. It's like that's the beautiful also teaching of ayahuasca. It's like you're not outside of you're part of the jungle, and as you're walking, as you're breathing, you are one element, more of it, with an energy that encompasses everything, that holds us there. I had a lot of this containing, or this container of the jungle, of nature, for that existential crisis. To me, it felt more as a spiritual liberation. Once the bruise started fading out, and I could feel my body and feel an aliveness. It was almost like suffering. Ayahuasca taught me, like, through suffering, and then you come back to your body, and it's through your senses and your sensuality, and awaken your sexuality, that I forget about any mental construct, any conditioning I've had, and my body just starts feeling. I start being. There was one session that I had with ayahuasca that really got to the core of, for me, what it is to be in my body, be in connection with my heart, feel my spirit. We talk about something, and many times, especially in cultures that are not so close to spirits, or spirits are not part of their everyday life. It's almost like we forget, so what or where do I feel my spirit? Where's my soul? So after many journeys of exploring all this fragmentation, there was one that surprised me. I drank the brew and started feeling my body buzzing with anxiety as I usually felt. The visions came and I saw the jungle in them. All the different plants of such an intense green were an invitation in my visions to touch them, smell them, and lay close to them. My body felt like it was waking up and needed to move. All of a sudden, I started moving slowly. The buzzing with anxiety was fading, and somehow my body started turning into excitement. All my senses were awakened as I started moving my body more and more. And I really felt like it was the movement of the serpent. So it was like my body, even walking in the jungle. It was more of a dance, and I really ended up dancing to some rhythm that was new, some rhythm that was primal. And it was a slow, smooth, and sensual rhythm. I walked in the jungle, completely alive, no shame of my movement, no shame of my body, half naked. I stood naked as the jungle stripped away any layer of self-consciousness left in me. I danced feeling welcome to my body and my soul. It was like coming home to myself, to nature, to my spirit. Ayahuasca put me in a spiritual state that was a state of pure eroticism, an instinctive and natural sexuality. I remember who I was in relationship to the world. I belonged. It was an experience that I feel now, if a lot of the times we can just peel all those conditionings, we can really be, we are nature. We are part of nature. And our bodies and our spirit are in contact with nature, are part of that as well. My erotic connection to the cosmos in that moment helped me heal that split between sexuality and spirituality. For the first time, I felt whole. I felt integrated. I didn't feel shame. I didn't feel guilt. One of the things that I also encounter is sexuality and spirituality involve embodiment, involve grounding. It's almost like the incarnation of the spirit in the flesh. Later that night, I felt such an intense sexual appetite that I gave in and had sex despite the restrictions on my dieta. A dieta is, as a lot of you know, a term referring to a specific way of taking the plant for purposes of healing or apprenticeship. It involves a curandero that chooses the plant that you need to diet on for healing or learning purposes. And of course, it's a place where you connect with the spirit of the plant. So there's a lot of restrictions, like no sugar, no salt, no sex, no fermented foods, and so on and so on. It is believed that following these restrictions, we're going to get real healing or better benefits. It also contains our energy to work so the plant can be working. Despite of it all, I still had this raw sexual energy and gave into the pleasure of my body. I was in the jungle with my partner. So at some point, if somebody's having an idea of having a dieta, it's better to go alone, and it's better to have your own tambo if you want to contain your energy and do an exploration that way. That same erotic energy I felt earlier to connect with the cosmos, to connect with the jungle. I used to connect sexually. The sex was intense, was primal, with heart, spirit, completely connected to all of my senses. In a very different way that I had had sex before. At some point, I just abandoned myself, and it was almost like through the act of having sex, just my spirit was so embodied, and at the same time, I just felt like I was flying and connected to something bigger than me. In that moment, I felt the approval of God. I think it's part of my reframing, that approval of God, like the enjoyment of God, of seeing us, of seeing humans, having sex. It is unnatural. It is a joyous thing. It is pleasurable. It is spiritual. Finally, I was returning to heaven and earth through this vehicle called ayahuasca and sex. One of the things after that experience, those experiences, is how to return back to my ordinary life, how that informs my sexuality, my sensuality, my erotic energy, my creative energy. It's all the same energy. And the work that a lot of the times we have to do to continue on the decondition process. And when we're immersed in relationships, our patterns will come back. Ayahuasca helps us see those patterns. They're so strong. And it's like, you can't miss it. But how do we integrate those things in our everyday life for integration purposes, for healing? One of the things that I've been working with is creating a model that is more of a sex-positive model of relating. You know, relating to people, but how do we hold ourselves? Like, a lot of my life, I spent having sex as a reaction to some suffering, some restriction, some very small container. But it was still a reaction. It was, I felt, after the ayahuasca journeys, that it was not me, that it was in reaction to. And also, growing up in a Latin country, male and female, just gender differences inform a lot of the sexuality. So that was another part that I was trying to heal. It's like, how do I know my body? How do I let my body inform of who I relate and how I relate? How do I let my body have a sensual expression? Just pure sensual in nature. How do I let my creative energy run and put all that sexual energy into creativity? So all those things are what I'm looking now into, a form of integrating, a form of holding the space for people to really decondition whatever that is that each of us needs to decondition. Sex and spirit is so different for each of us. But my purpose as a therapist and also as a guide in journey work is to really help people find what it is for them through their bodies. What it is for them to feel fully human, fully sexual, fully creative, fully who they came to be. And that is liberating. There's no dogma there. Nobody. We don't need to follow anybody's recipe for how to connect to God, how to connect with ourselves, and how to connect with others. That is the purpose of my work. That has been the purpose of discovering what it is for me. Now what my parents told me, now these two places that I grew up with, Catholic and shamanic, and how do I blend? A lot of the times you don't. A lot of the times you just need to abandon, peel off that is not informing you through your body, through your spirit. My work is not necessarily around sexuality. A lot of the times my clients come with issues around sexuality, and I help them see that a lot of the issues around sexuality are around spirituality as well. And how do we blend? How do we blend? How do we hold both? As I say, it's been a long process. It started when I was like 4 or 5 years old. And each time I use an entheogen, it's almost like adding a new something, a new information, a new thing to decondition more, open up more, connect more to myself, and just feel the body. If you really listen to the body, that's just gonna inform you. It's really gonna inform you. Thank you. So any questions? And I also would love to hear people's experiences on ayahuasca or any other entheogen and sexuality and spirituality. Let's make this more of a dialogue. Yes?
Yeah, I had a wonderful experience one time where I felt this center open up, very sensual. I was quite surprised, that I heard about the hara or the cough, the different...
The power center, like
yeah,
your
this
belly?
power, yeah,
like
and it has...
belly wisdom?
I don't know if other people have experienced this, but it's kind of like a warm sensuality, and I was shocked how repressed I was, That's what I want to say.
Were you on an entheogen? Were you on ayahuasca?
Yeah, I think I was.
Good answer.
Theoretically.
Anybody else? Questions or experiences? Yeah.
Can you comment on the properties of so-called sexual magic, for lack of a better phrase, in unlocking the internally produced DMT or other molecules of spirituality in our mind? Ayahuasca does unlock us, so does sex, and sex by itself is a great creator.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to hear any commentary on that.
I have just had the experiences of drinking ayahuasca and waking up my energy through it. I've had many experiences of intentional sex to wake up into or tap into certain energies that I would like to tap into. I'm not that familiar, or I would like to know what you mean by sex magic. And what it does in the body. Go ahead.
To unlock the human brain's own potential, when we produce our own psychedelics in our own mind, sex can unlock that potential to experience what we already produce. Ayahuasca introduces these chemicals into us, but sex itself, so-called sex magic, is really just sex being used to unlock the human
that.
mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are some practices on sacred sexuality, also that can unlock that, like Tantra and other practices that, yes, can connect you to that spirit, like a full connection of your body and an openness. That's the only experience I've had, other than drinking ayahuasca and intentional sex at times. Yes?
First of all, thank you so very much. I really enjoyed hearing this presentation because I am a sex worker, and so that's what I do. And for a long time, I've explained my work as willfully altering sexual states of consciousness for healing and vulnerability, and that I think really tags on to the previous question. But mostly I just want to say that I've begun exploring with entheogens, and it's funny because I come from the world of sexuality, and that's how I've learned for a long time, and I had the same processes. And I don't think I really have a question so much as a sharing of experience and the work that I do to be present with people. And it's really incredible to hear cross-discipline work and integration among the many ways that we work to heal with people and to foster connections and bridges. So thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to share an experience with psilocybin, which, as you know, is a very similar compound in a way to ayahuasca, in that they're both tryptamine indoles. And the experience was using psilocybin mushrooms in the forest and beginning to see the erotic nature of the natural world, in that it's all my experience was that it was this very sexual, very feminine force of creation, and that is at the root of all life. And I began to see sort of the feminine as the creative force, and perhaps the masculine as the destructive force, and that nature was inherently feminine, and it was a very the process of nature developing was very erotic.
Thank you.
I had two questions. The first is, when you talk about sexuality, do you mean just the act of sex, or also the way you have a conversation with someone, or the way that you interact with another human being? Is it just...
It is an energy. It's the sexual energy. Yes, it can be an interaction, it can be in sensuality, it can be in a conversation, it can be in the very act of sex, yes.
Okay, so unlocking that sexual energy unlocks your interaction with anybody, or not just the physical act of sex, but the spiritual being of being a sexual
being?
Yeah.
So yes, so when I was growing up, it was more the shame and guilt of a sexual act or of touching, or it's like, yes, that physical aspect of sexuality. As I've been working more in looking at myself, it was that sexual energy that I wanted to wake up for me and just hold myself in that sexual energy. That's where connection happens. That's where warmth happens. That's when relationships can happen. And it's not just per se the sexual act, as it is an energy. It's the creative energy as well for me.
Okay. And the second part is, how did you integrate the morality that's embedded in the Catholic Judeo-Christian view with the shaman? Like, how did you integrate morality into your sexuality?
I didn't. I abandoned completely my Catholic upbringing because, yes, I tormented, as I say myself, since I was 4 or 5 years old up until I was in my 20s because of, all that guilt and shame. So I just went away from it and really started going more through shamanism, through my father's lineage, which was liberating. I mean, it's funny, I grew up with having all this guilt and shame, and yet I would go to my family's, like my dad's family side, and they have all these tonics and things. Everybody's from the jungle. Everybody has, it's such liberating. And I was like, is something wrong with me that I cannot just be like that? So I decided, okay, I'm gonna leave this. And I grew up, I mean, I went to a Catholic school, and I just had to abandon that in order to find myself. And now, it's more like I can go back to some of it. I can go back into revising what pieces of, because it's not like we abandon a containing myth that we grew up with. We don't. It's a form of either reframing or integrating. I'm just in that process now. As going back into what really informed me, what really is valuable, something that I can really take from that part of also my upbringing. Yeah, I'm in the process of that.
Last question.
I don't know how we're supposed to talk about sex and entheogens in just an hour, but okay. I wonder if you have in your inquiry ever come across the voice of the mushroom urging couples to conceive children. This is something that's happened to me a couple of times. I discussed it with Terence McKenna, who it happened to. In my study of the Eleusinian mysteries, it was part of the Eleusinian rite where the experiencers would hear voices cry, conceive, and this is interpreted as part of the agricultural symbolism of those mysteries. But I wonder if this has come up for you and if you have any thoughts on it. That's one question. And then the other one is, what do you make of the prohibitions in the many shamanic cultures about using them now? Salvia divinorum, they say don't even let salvia grow near your house. And are these prohibitions that are rational in that they further the effects of the entheogen, or are they simply authoritarian to create?
Okay. So I'm going to start by answering your second question. Yes, I myself have talked to many shamans about the sexual restrictions and what they offer. I talked to a woman finally. Because so there's two things here. It's not only that there is a yes, we're forbidden to have sex, and they give all this. The shamans have sex with the women sometimes, a lot of times in Peru. So therefore, I just noticed that, okay, there is that aspect of it. I talked to a woman. She's a curandera, and when I decided to really take on sex and spirit in ayahuasca, what she told me is it's not so much a restriction as it is a recommendation, because you are taking in a plant and you're dieting on a plant, so it's almost like not a conversation, it's a relationship with that plant. And a lot of the times you are clearing your energy, so through merging with someone, it's almost like there's another energy there. She explained the whole thing just on energetic levels. Intellectually, I don't get it, but I get what it is to be on a diet, what it is to conserve your energy, and direct it somehow. I had an amazing experience breaking my diet. And like any, good Catholic girl, went to the shaman and confessed. And that was my last confession. Anyway, he just looked at me like nothing, right? I mean, probably he was also sleeping with people. And I don't know. I just felt this need to confess, the last lingering of my Catholic upbringing. On your first question, on my experience with mushrooms, I really don't get sexual. Ayahuasca is by far one of the entheogens that really wakes up my sexual energy, not only in terms of having sex, just as an opening to creativity, to sensuality, to passion for something. I don't have that experience with mushrooms. Thank you.
Okay, I was mistaken. We have a few more minutes for another question or two, and here's one now.
All right. So I just want to share this experience, and Veronica and I are colleagues and great friends, and we really have our hearts into this topic. And I just would like to share on the same line, because I appreciate a lot this work and your presentation, that recently I had an experience like that, but not on entheogens. I was in a holotropic breathwork session, and I was really in a very deep altered state. And I found out how that sexual energy awakening in me was actually a balm, a medicine for a grief, profound grief, existential grief that I was experiencing. I was having a lot of image of torture, and as usually do, but the sexual energy was really coming from the bottom, and each and every time I shifted into a place of pain, this energy was coming and releasing that pain in a way that there's really no words to describe, but was really effective. And it's great that you today are talking about this, so my gratitude. Thank you.
It is through the sensuality of the body that we forget about our pain.
Yeah.
Many times. And it's like almost like a release of it. A lot of our pain comes from mental constructions and embodiment of conditioning. And anything, any practice that can help you release that, please do. And just find that inner energy that we all came to enjoy.
Anybody else?
There's a question over there. Adrian? Adrian. Your little motor.
He's coming, he's coming.
Thank you for your presentation. It was very informative. It is very informative. On that split that you were talking about, it seems like if that's, first of all, the Judeo-Christian and in particular the puritanical stain on everybody growing up in America, I think for some people, if they got rid of that, it wouldn't be as enjoyable anymore. I think some people have actually eroticized the shame and the guilt. So there's that. And also, sorry, also, I'll keep it brief. Also, I think that split of, well, the separation, that's what I mean by the split. If that were ever resolved, I think a lot of people would be out of business. So I think that as long as that's happening, you know, there are going to be a lot of people making money, and I wish everybody luck with that. So thank you. That's all. I'm done.
Well, it is a matter more of waking up and liberating. It's like an energy that, can you imagine if all of us here, like just had that, you know, whatever integration, whatever thing that we need to come up with to feel fully alive, you know, in our sexualities, in our connections. Just living the way we came to live, informed by our bodies, informed by our spirit. They're not separate. And if we could just tap into that way of knowing, as opposed to being in our heads about it. A lot of people talk about sex. If we made love a lot more, if we made love a lot more with all of ourselves, I think that is a part that we can be completely liberated and free and more creative into even thinking that we can have some peace in the world, some peace that starts with us. Anybody else?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. Veronica, we would like you to have this little gift in respect and appreciation for your presentation. Thank you so much.